get into in the next hour or so.
Oh, yeah.
So this is a perfect point where we can officially kick this off. So I see that we have a good number of attendees already on, and I can see more coming in. So welcome everyone. Thank you for participating in the next of our webinar series. So today we'll be speaking about retail and the restaurant industries. So we have a very illustrious panel today, and I'll let them all introduce themselves in a moment. So we have Nancy Marina, partner with Janover. We have Sam Scanlon, a VP with Houlihan Lokey. We have Nicholas Camiotti, a principal with Bressler Amery. And we have Jeff Giddo with V Group Concept. So if you all want to just go down the line and introduce yourselves briefly. So
I
Jeff,
guess I'm starting off. I
Mhm.
don't know who to start off. Hi, I'm Nancy Marinas. I'm a partner with Janover, an accounting firm, a CPA firm out in Garden City and New York City offices. I have a vast interest in the hospitality industry or the retail, where it's like a lot of the mom and pop grocery stores, restaurants. And I think it all started from when I was young and my parents were all in that type of business. So I'm aware of what's going on, and I'm here to help anybody out.
Thanks, Nancy. Nick?
Did you say Nick? I'm sorry.
I sure did.
All right. Hi, my name is Nick Camiotti. I'm with Bressler Amery and Ross. I'm a principal in a handful of different practice groups, but primarily in the securities world. And then from that, we represent some private equity and hedge funds, and have a number of different investments all over in retail and otherwise. And I also chair the firm's cannabis practice, so I wear a lot of hats. But in this situation we're dealing with, I have a lot of experience dealing with, the retail and restaurant world from some of my clients' investments, and then some of my other direct clients and friends who are leaning on me on a lot of various changes and issues that we're seeing right now.
Thanks, Nick. Dan?
Yeah, hey, Sam Scanlon. I'm an officer in the Consumer Food and Retail Group at Houlihan Lokey, the largest independent investment bank doing M&A and capital markets advisory. I focus specifically on retail and actually also head up our cannabis efforts, but can also speak to some of the trends on the restaurant side. There's a lot of similar dynamics.
All right, thanks, Sam. And Jeff?
Jeff Giddo, started in the restaurant industry 25 years ago out of college. Bar back, the same old chestnut as you work your way up. Worked my way up to owner. Opened up about 7 or 8 venues, realized I got sued all the time, went to law school, became a lawyer, opened up more, venues. As you move down that linear path, you kind of become a little more disconnected, but you always realize, the provenance. So I know the struggle from the one end and then the struggle from the other end. Then me and some partners opened up a dispensary and about 4 cannabis and hemp grows in Oregon. So because I feel with post-prohibition, cannabis will be the next alcohol. So we started getting into that. So we have dispensaries, restaurants, bars, nightclubs, and all of the problems in between. And that's me.
All right, thanks, Jeff. So Sam, I think we want to start with you. From your seat as the iBanker, what are you seeing in the market? I mean, I know there's not much going on in the world, but maybe you can just speak a little bit to what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, sure. And I'll speak kind of from what we're hearing from our clients and some of the unique dynamics and challenges. Not surprisingly, the market has been rough, and it will continue to be. The concept of a zero revenue environment, which is what a lot of retail businesses are experiencing right now, is completely unprecedented. When you think of the fixed costs associated with retail, and I think what we're kind of seeing is a couple different buckets and a couple different challenges that people are taking. I think in terms of ignoring those that are doing well in this market or can stay open, I think we look at it as 2 types of businesses: lost sales and delayed purchases. And so, the most desperate situations are really the ones where you've got the lost sales, where you can't make them up. Restaurants, barbershops, gym membership, dry cleaners, things like that, where you're never going to be able to make that up, and it's making the hole a lot bigger. There are other ones that are more what we call delayed purchases, cell phone stores, apparel, other things like that, where, we believe there'll be demand that gets pushed back, and that'll help those businesses kind of get ramped up once we get past this. A couple interesting things that we've noticed are that, some of the biggest uncertainties are around, startup costs and ramp up. There's a lot of uncertainty in terms of how quickly businesses will be able to rehire, when they'll be able to get to steady state in terms of pre-COVID type revenue numbers. If you kind of talk to people out there, it's very hard to underwrite how quickly people will feel comfortable getting past COVID and starting to go back to business as usual in terms of retail, and frankly, whether or not they ever will. One thing we've seen is very unique landlord-tenant dynamics, which are going on right now. This was sort of one of the delayed consequences. When you think about, when you pay rent at the beginning of the month, this really didn't become an issue until the beginning of April. Some dealt with it proactively. A lot of them are doing it now. And it's unique in that usually the landlord has the power in the relationship, but I think what we've seen here is a quasi form of mutually assured destruction, in that the landlords understand that if they put companies down, there's no alternative for them. And so there's a much greater desire to work with companies, to work with businesses, especially small businesses, to try to keep them afloat. It's also led to some interesting bankruptcy dynamics, whereby a lot of businesses that you would see rush into bankruptcy to shed onerous leases, landlords have a much different tone these days. So there's a interesting dynamic there. One other one is, the e-commerce supply chain dynamic. You're kind of seeing this with a lot of retail and apparel companies where, there's a question of, do we cut prices today to drive sales, to bring in cash, to keep us afloat? Or do we shut off e-com knowing we're not going to be able to make much money and make sure that we've got a solid inventory base for the next season? And it's really a function of, what type of retailer or apparel company you are. If you're in the men's suit business, odds are, when we all come out of this, hopefully in the summer or the fall, people will all of a sudden, need work clothes again. And, having the inventory will be valuable. However, if it's more seasonal businesses, it could be tougher. And so there's a lot of uncertainty. A lot of people are doing a lot of creative things to, try to properly address this and position themselves to come out on the other end.
I think that's a great job of summing up where we are now from a few different angles. And in that light, Jeff, you actually started us off talking about some of the challenges that you're seeing right now as an owner and operator. So do you mind just, giving us a high level view of over the last 2 months, what your life has been like and just what some of those challenges have been?
Yeah. I'll free flow. I may pop around a little bit because it's kind of a bit voluminous of the list, right?
That's fair.
And they're all very, very specific, right? Restaurants have a specific challenge, nightclubs specific, taverns with food specific, dispensaries actually the same or better. So those issues aren't necessarily the same. So high points, sans the cannabis market, high points of the restaurant alcohol aspects of it. Our restaurant went from probably down 50% sales because we modified to a takeout, pickup, delivery. We brought on Uber Eats, Postmates. I mean, you name it, we brought it on. And that was a 3-week wait because everybody in their family went onto it at the same time. Got to a break even, shed a lot of staff, high good points. There was no discussion with the problem children that every restaurant or, every hospitality business has and the politics that you have to keep them. So we were able to, just like 2008, when we restructured the organization, it was a moment to get rid of a lot of dead weight. So we restructured it, got rid of a lot of things, got to a break even. Landlords for that particular class of trade, restaurants. All were not as wielding because they're like, oh, well, you just get your PPP loan and, you do takeout, excuse.
Mhm.
Pretty much rent's due on the first, good luck. And that was a mentality from that group of landlords. But with the break even and the hope of a PPP loan to, as Nicholas was saying, to kind of bring it back for the zero-sum game. Not so worried about the restaurants. The bars and the nightclubs, really big problems. Zero sales, no end in sight. What is life going to look at in a post-COVID environment? Landlords were wielding on that because it's pretty much undeniable. There's an executive order from the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, like, you are shut down, period. There's constitutional issues in it, not to get into the legal stuff. I mean, we could go all day into that. Those are a challenge. Those are problems. Some might not make it. And some may strategically not make it because there will have to be a focus on marketing efforts because we have a management group, because you never want to have ownership of a bunch of different entities from an asset protection standpoint. So we have a management group. So the management group only has limited resources with no employees now. So we've got to retool things. We got to refocus, shed the dead weight on a higher level of which companies are we going to keep. I have more. I could free flow more, but those are kind of top employees. Heartbreaking, letting go of 100 and some employees pretty much within 48 hours. Managing the human capital aspect of it, very, very important. Something that I probably dropped the ball with all of the loans and applications and dealing with partners and what that means for them on capital calls and how you structure that. But the human capital was something that probably needs to be paid attention to everyone, in this webinar. I think it's something that gets lost in translation on it because your horses, so to speak, your key employees, they're scared and confused and they're not getting their unemployment. And, we've had to say, hey, here's our applications for the PPP. We're bringing you back on a limited basis. And it keeps a lot of wheels from coming off the wagon for some of these people that just may pivot. I mean, a lot of them are in college. A lot of them are young and move back home with their parents in another state. So there is that would be, if there's any takeaway that I have learned that I didn't do well in the beginning, that I'm doing better now, is keeping the communication with your team. Management, we all do anyways. Your top level management, that's a 101. But right. it's the guys and the women who are the heart of the organization in restaurants and bars and nightclubs.
Again, very well said. The human aspect of this does indeed get lost sometimes in the facts and the figures and the numbers. So I definitely appreciate you bringing that perspective. To pivot a bit to Nancy and Nancy, maybe we start with you on this.
Sure.
What has surprised you the most?
The surprising that I saw the most right now is how look, we go into New York City, we go out the doors and everything is closed. Just the essential workers, and as far as the restaurant industry, I mean, a lot of them conform to what Jeff said. They're doing takeouts, or the takeout liquor, like they're making your drinks and getting there. But in the accounting senses, the overwhelming loans that we're applying for, though, the payroll protection plan and the lack of how fast the money is coming in to try to keep the employees active, and the money running out, and the government trying to get another stimulus package is finding the most difficult part of the whole process. We're trying to help everybody out getting these loans out, but it's a process of, first come, first serve. Is there enough money out there to help these employers let the employees survive? Because that's what the purpose of this payroll protection plan is to help us, or help the employer give the money to the employees to survive until the hospitality industry could open up. And probably that's going to be the worst industry to get going that fast, as Jeff is saying, is because there's going to be a lot of social distancing, and how do you handle all that? And as the landlord tenant is, you were able to fit 100 people into your location, you may have to cut it down to 50 people. So that's going to be the toughest industry, in my opinion. It's only my opinion, that's going to have the long-term effect of trying to get up and going. I think Cuomo just said now May 15th that the city's closing all pools and all outdoor activities. So it's going to be a hard summer for the hospitality industry, where we expect the summer for us to be going there. So I think we're going to expect more of a stimulus package going on. What are we going to expect? No idea yet, because it's a constant change. Every day is changing differently as far as what is next to be done. What are we going
The
to
only thing that's been consistent to this point is
Changing.
that it changes daily.
Every day they're changing. The SBA is changing the rules constantly. They're cutting the programs, the grants now per employee, where it used to be different. So, and they're very behind on that. There's not enough staff to get all these programs going. And New York City had a grant, and within a completely closed down. So I gotta see that's gonna be the toughest thing, is getting money from these stimulus packages to the employers to get to the employees.
Yeah, I'll jump in without being asked about this, because this is near and dear to my heart. But the way that the PPP has been rolled out has been nothing short but an absolute train wreck disaster. By just ceding this to the banks, it was supposed to be first in, first out. That's not what's happening. It seems like if you are in the hospitality business, to follow up on Jeff's point, if he's been successful in getting money through the program through a lot of his restaurant or nightclub entities, that's very impressive, and you should, buy a bottle of wine or something better for your banker, because I am a little bit more cynical here. It seems to me that what's occurring is that some of these entities are looking at which companies are going to be the winners, ultimately who's going to survive. And that's the opposite of what this program is supposed to really accomplish here. It seems like the CARES Act says one thing, and the practice of handing the football off to the banks has turned it into a completely different program. It's not first in, first out. We've seen that. Companies had applications in, at 8 a.m. on the Friday that the program opened, and they have not been funded, and other entities have been funded. The way that they've changed the rules to allow for various different, you accountants to play with the numbers to qualify as a small business based on your total revenue and all of those things versus what your tax return showed, zero. Oh yeah, we made no money ever, so now we're a small business. They've constantly changed that. So in theory, it sounds good, and everybody wants to beat their chest on what this accomplished. But so far from my clients, the feedback that I'm receiving is not positive at all. And going to additional stimulus, I couldn't agree more, but there needs to be a level of oversight put in here as to look into what is being approved, what does underwriting entail. This is supposed to be a federally backed program where we're the first in, we're supposed to be paid. That's not what's occurring. And it seems to me if the banks think like, yeah, maybe this isn't the greatest investment here, those loans are not being funded right now. And now
where do you think the biggest gaps are right now?
What?
Where do you think the biggest gaps are right now?
Accountability. I think it's they've taken a government program where there was supposed to be, uniformity here, to put it in the hands of underwriters. And the underwriters are going to do their jobs. They're going to say, these guys look like nightclub. This is going to be a problem. Social nightclub in middle of Manhattan. I don't know about this one. I don't know how long this one's going to survive. We might be buying on a note here that we're going to not be able to collect on. And that's not if the intent of the plan, that was not what they were supposed to be doing. So I agree. Like, that's been, to me, the way it's been rolled out, it has been frustrating for a lot of clients of mine. And I've been dealing with it. Sorry to be a little bit heated on it, but I just think that this has just been, from talking to bankers, from talking to clients on the banking side, the bankers are saying, we're just sending it to underwriting. We don't know the rules constantly are changing on us. The clients are frustrated because they had their applications in weeks ago. You know, you go turn on CNBC and everybody's like, yeah, we're funding, we're sending all this money, and finding somebody who's actually been funded is few and far between. So that said, on the positive side, I would say the ingenuity of some of the folks here has been a tremendous surprise. Some clients who are restaurants now have basically turned into farm to table type to your home, where they've taken their supply chain and they've added direct to the consumer. There's been lots of ingenuities and lots of positives. The PPP right now, I'm just frustrated with because I'm getting beat up left and right on.
So, and that's been pretty universal, it seems. It seems only recently that, I mean, over the last few days, really, that applications have actually been fully processed and there's been some level of movement. Now it seems that from this first round of funding that the program's out of funds already. So
Nobody's
seen if it will be refunded. Very interesting, to say the least.
There's going to be a lot of litigation over this, and there's going to be a lot of regulatory scrutiny. We're going to be hearing about this program for a long, long time. I would bet, since I can't bet on sports right now, I would bet on that.
Not that we're endorsing any gambling here.
I mean, we're talking. I thought we're doing cannabis. I thought we're doing bars. We're doing, this is the Vice panel. I thought,
one at a time.
Zach, one more question.
Yes.
Problems is the Treasury has come out with all these ifs, ands, and buts, like paid sick leave for workers, the small business protection, the paid leave. But if the employers can't get that PPP number to pay all these programs, they're behind the eight balls because, even though the Treasury gave you guidance on all this is not happening. So what they're saying is still come up with the money. We'll give you some sort of payroll tax deduction on certain things. And yet it's still finding it very difficult for the employers to do that because they still don't have the cash to do it.
Right.
Because on the hospitality and the restaurants, they lost a lot of revenues as far as that. Yes, now we have unemployment and the Fed kicked in an extra $600,000. So some people are saying, I'd rather take unemployment. But, I think it's going to get harder. If you thought April was worse, I think May is going to even be worse than April and maybe even June. I don't foresee the hospitality picking up till the end of the summer, maybe. We're going to have a hard time with these grants and these programs that not funding completely. And supposedly all these SBA loans are granting that any restaurant or hospitality who have the codes that we put on the tax returns of 72 are supposed to be much easier to get the PPP loans or pass the SBA test of owners' attributes, and all these affiliations and giving them that they don't have to meet the affiliations if they're under certain employees. But it doesn't seem to be working at this stage because, as Nicholas is saying, is they're having a hard time accepting the underwriting programs.
Right.
I think that's what the problem is going to be. Even though they're giving them all these ifs, ands, and buts, they're getting stopped at a level right now. And is the government or SBA going to be a little more lax on that? I have no idea who makes those decisions right now. We're in arms as far as this.
Exactly.
Which is a good point, and it is why it does seem to be that we're in a transition point. But Nick, you brought up a pretty interesting point as well, outside of the PPP, regarding how businesses have been adapting. Sure. And Jeff, you touched on this a bit before as well, as far as utilizing some of the technology out there, restructuring a bit. So do you mind talking a bit more detail about how effective you think that actually is, how going to, I think you mentioned Grubhub and some of these other technology service providers. What has that experience been like, and do you think it's truly effective?
Yes, it's truly effective to diversify the revenue stream when you have zero revenue otherwise. So I mean, it's absolutely effective. However, it's a complete paradigm change of the norm and a retooling of everybody's skill sets, back to basics of customer service that's not face-to-face. Usually you call for a pickup. Hey, what do you want? Cool, boom, click. Hey, how's it going? No, you want something else again. The jazz is retooled. There's no Zoom on a pickup order. Trying to figure out how to navigate parking. If we have 3 different places, one of them just happens to be right off a main road that you can pull in. Otherwise, people are walking, coming with homeless people and all kinds of other stuff that people want to deal with. The pickup is more of a challenge than the delivery services. The delivery services are basically a saving grace for restaurants. And I'm speaking specifically about restaurants right now because there's just no, the alcohol. So the alcohol delivery, we have a couple of speakeasy type bars. Unless you're an owner operator, and this is just a practical reality, and you're not doing it yourself, and you have to rely on people who don't care, employees who are just saucy that they're not making their tips or making their money. That is a when you're talking about making alcohol and you're dealing, like the state of Florida has a pretty robust department of alcohol, tobacco, firearms. So you've got to keep it tight. You've got to keep it, it has to follow all the rules. I haven't done it because I can't assure the quality. You get out there, you got to put your best foot forward. So I haven't taken that step because I'm on quarantine. I can't go in and do it myself, or at least make sure everybody's doing it. And then there's also the aspect for the guys in the bars where it's not super popular. And I'm giving my own personal experience, my own personal analysis of the situation, not being tone deaf. Am I going to have a couple kids go in there and deal with a bunch of people on something that I don't know it's going to make money, and have the come line in the back of somebody getting sick? So it's very complicated, and there's a lot of fear right now in Florida because Florida's like, everybody says, oh, Florida's going to be the next one. In Orlando, I'm in Orlando, and we're a very tourist-based environment, and there's a lot of reputation. The downtown Orlando area is talking about all kinds of restrictions and looking for the bad actors. So I haven't done the takeout for liquor, but and you can't do that with Uber and Grubhub, et cetera, et cetera. We have package licenses for our liquor licenses. We've debated about delivering liquor too, but then again, I'm relegated to 23-year-old kids delivering and exposing themselves and getting the ID and possibly losing a $350,000 asset because somebody didn't do something right. I'm not ready to take the risk for still making zero money or losing money. So I'm just kind of waiting for the direction and the guidance, hoping, as Nicholas said, hoping for the PPP loan, but it's just hope. It's cockeyed optimism. I have 15 idle emergency applications, and 2 were approved. 1 was for less than 10,000. I have 10 PPP loans in. 1 was approved for a space that's not in the restaurant industry. That was the last application I did of the 10, which is insane. I don't know if the money's coming or not either. So it's really a wait and see, and adapting is kind of, for me, and I could be coming at it from a very conservative place, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who are dialing in who are owner operators, mom and pops who are in the trenches. I would highly suggest figuring out that model, because I have seen it, as Nicholas said. I've seen people really, really doing some unique approaches, but those unique approaches require execution, and the right people. And so if you can't assure that, I don't have the time or the wherewithal to deal with the problems that come with that attempt. Right. So I've been very, very arm's length on a lot of those things.
And Jeff, sorry to jump in, but I have a client who is doing incredibly well, all things considered. I'm shocked, actually. He owns a handful of Pliables franchises. His issue is, he says he's going to have to shut down because he relies on the younger workforce, and he'll get a call like, so-and-so's not coming in tomorrow, from their mom or their dad, because he's relying on 16 to 18-year-olds, and the parents won't let them come in. And it was, they would work the night shifts, so they were the better employees. And now he's like, I'm down to 8 employees. We're doing 85 to 90% of capacity. We're not really going down. We're making money, but I'm gonna have to shut just because I don't have enough people who I can keep, and people go out on unemployment and they can make more money than they could from coming in. So, why would they even come in? Some of the older folks, obviously.
Yeah, no doubt about it. There's also we're all aware of the difference between the West Coast and East Coast. There's an entirely different vibration on how people work and how people approach things. The West Coast is very, very, very conservative. The employees out there, they're just like, I'm not coming to work. Deal with it. East Coast, and it's mostly the younger, and this is just once again, a younger male population. Our staff, like, what do you have for me to do? And, they're going to the beach. They're the guys that are on the videos and in South Florida. It's like, oh, we'll do, but they're also a liability because they're not being careful. They're walking around without masks and things like that, which then again, egg on the face, tone deaf. You're not really paying attention. So you're darned if you do, darned if you don't on some level. And yeah, you're right. That is. And if you are not there to quarterback it, and it's a time for leadership. And if you are a strong leader and you are able to manage a team and a willing team who's intelligent and approaches it critically, and I say intelligent because you've got to be aware of all your actions. You can't have somebody who's just tripping over themselves and doing it because they want to make you happy too. They're equally as much of a liability. So it's a hyper focused type of restaurant bar who has a good team and a solid leadership. And I think those are the guys like you were talking about, Nicholas, with the farm to table. Those are the companies that will make it. That will be able to focus on the basics and the 101 and get through without having any money. The PPP will bridge that gap between that A and B. And then what if there's a V-shaped, recovery, that will bridge the C. But there are going to be a lot of people falling off the grid, no doubt about it.
And that's very true. And even the National Restaurant Association estimates that more than 50% by the end of this month will be permanently out of business. Now that, of course, is a high-level survey that can be, a few, there'll be some variations there, but overall that seems to be in line with what the market trends are saying. So using that as a point of transition, Sam, as the M&A representative here, how has this market changed for you? What measures are you looking at for potential deals, and just how much has it changed for you?
Yeah, I think you had what was a very hot M&A market virtually shut down overnight. New deals will not be launched in this. I think deals that were in early stages are put on hold. I think the only activity you're really seeing is deals that were far along that have, motivated parties to close have really gotten done. And that's when you have strategic buyers that, really want an asset, or you have highly motivated sellers who are willing to give some concessions. Shockingly, we actually closed a retail deal last week. A franchisee that is basically shut down as non-essential right now. We had a willing seller. The buyer was willing to close with some concessions. And since we didn't get any financing, the seller took a seller note instead, and they got the deal done. So it can get done. I think they're isolated cases. I think, until we sort of understand when we're going to come out of the other end, people are not going to launch deals. People are not going to want to close deals. The only deals you're really going to see are ones that are forced out of financial distress. And I think you're going to see a wave of those deals start popping up in the next 2 to 3 weeks. People are really starting to realize the level of stress that's in the market. And you've got a bunch of industries where if they can't get some kind of rescue financing solution, they're going to have to do some form of distressed sale. And there's going to be a lot of that. I think it's just going to take a little bit of time for, secured creditors to push the issue there. I think everybody wanted to take a wait and see approach because everybody understands, distressed sales in this type of market is not really how you maximize value for stakeholders, or maintain going concerns. But at some point, industries that already had trouble, such as retail and restaurants, that this has just sort of exacerbated the situation. So it'll be very interesting to see. I think you'll see a lot of people take a lot of creative approaches. The one interesting aspect now is, unlike some prior downturns, the banking system is flush with capital. Capital providers have a bunch of money that they have to spend. And I think they will do so opportunistically, and you'll see a wave of deals probably get done over the course of the next 2 months in that veil.
But that is very, as you said, very different than in other situations in the past.
Yeah, and it's sector specific, right? I mean, deal activity in tech actually is doing pretty decent considering. Will that continue through this? Probably not. I think you just had a bunch of deals that have been underway. But in the retail and restaurant space, you're going to see a wave of distressed deals come through. But it's going to be in isolated pockets, right? I think when you look at the healthy M&A market is going to remain virtually shut down.
But do you see a large consolidation happening, or just attrition at this point?
I think it depends who you're talking about in the individual, sets of circumstances. I think, in the restaurant sector, it's a function of your format, right? I think, some of the larger format type restaurants are going to have a much harder time because it's going to hurt that much more through this. And it's going to be harder to come out the other end. And, there's a belief that there were too many different brands out there to begin with. On the retail side, retail's been stressed for a long time. And I think there's going to be a lot of questions as to whether certain businesses are really going concerns or whether they should be shut down for asset value. Look at some of the big names that have gone under over the last couple of years, Toys R Us. You look at companies like Bed Bath and Beyond. What do you make of what's going to happen to those just massive formats that it's a lot harder for them to even just absorb the shift to e-com, let alone now deal with, a virtually zero revenue environment.
Not to mention the supply chain issues that come with it as well.
Yep. There's a lot of uncertainty in the supply chain. I have a client who's a cell phone retailer. They're one of the big franchisees of, one of the big service providers. And, they actually in early March started running out of inventory on the iPhones. It was a trickle down from all of the COVID issues in China where they get all the pieces. And so, everybody's going to have their own unique supply chain challenges on top of everything else. So it's a matter of knowing your business and figuring that out. We work with a lot of brand licensing companies. And they typically rely on what's called a guaranteed minimum royalty. And those are ironclad. You enter into them with creditworthy counterparties, and all of a sudden now nobody's a creditworthy counterparty. And licensees are not honoring those guaranteed minimums in this time. So it's just you run the gamut of different types of businesses, and everybody's got their kind of own nuanced challenges that are coming out of this. And those that are clever and adapt will probably come out the other side healthier and in a less competitive environment. I don't think everybody will come out the other side.
Right. And again, well said on that. It will be very, very interesting to see who actually survives this and who's stronger for it, because some groups will, life will go on at some point, and how are these future businesses structured? What technology is supporting them? It'd be very interesting to see.
To piggyback on that with Sam is there definitely, I've had 2 deals that died immediately, and they were far along. Didn't want to give a lot of concessions, a lot of fear, asking for too much on the other side. Depending upon, for a lot of the listeners, if you have unique structures and you have tolerance to be unique, one of our venues, we have a couple partners who aren't capitalized enough for capital calls. I was able to work with the landlord to get forgiveness on rent to absorb that partner's part of their equity. and then give that partner a buyout based upon a number of their normal distributions to try to bring cash flow in, because you can't find it from the banks right now. There's other ways that we did with raising money internally and hinging it to equity, at a discount, because people didn't want to put money in, but they would put money in if there was some sort. It's all the art of the deal on some of these situations. And if you have certain assets, liquor licenses, commercial real estate, there's other ways to leverage it. But money from space is all. I mean, I gave up. I gave up a couple weeks into it. Zach, we were talking, about it. You're shaking the trees and trying to find it. Deals are falling through, and it's just complete triage. But there are solutions for some people that may not be immediately identifiable. But it's, sometimes you wake up in the morning, the aha moment, you piggyback on that and try to take it down the rabbit hole. But I definitely would suggest people to maybe not get, I'm not saying I'm not, because I go down the fear rabbit hole too. But there are solutions. It's kind of like if you look at your house and, you redo the furniture, and why did I never think of that before? They're floating around in the ether, and it's about plucking it out, with the right people, communicating with your partners, communicating with your landlords, and figuring out. A lot of landlords want to be part of a business. That's their tenants. They want to be able to see the numbers. They want to take, get it, especially with the bars and nightclubs. There is an inherent jazz that goes with good businesses like that people want to be part of it. They want to take their clients in to get a drink. They want to go, entertain their friends at their quote unquote restaurant. So you got to identify who those people are, those good customers are, those good landlords are. Outside the scope of financial institutions or M&A deals, which is where normally you get it.
Very true. No, again, it's a very unique perspective, and it brings a lot of value, frankly. It's not a one-size-fits-all sort of solution.
Yeah, I think it's creative ideas like that. I think that's spot on. And, I think very much so, you've got to have partnership in getting deals done. You've got to have people motivated on both sides. I'm actually in a landlord-tenant negotiation now where they asked for things that were really, really onerous. And my knee-jerk reaction was, pound sand. And then I said, you know what? You've been a long-time tenant. You've never opened up your books to me. I'll sign an NDA. You show me what really is going on here, and I will try to find a creative way to work with you. And at first they told me absolutely not. And then I said, well, how do you expect me to work with you if I don't know where you are? How do you expect to find a fair middle ground here? And they finally realized, it's not somebody trying to snoop around, my business. It's somebody who's trying to help me stay afloat here. And I should play ball, because I might get an SBA loan before he does for that business. And if I do that, I can, potentially help float to keep them alive. And so it's interesting, because I think if we all put on a different hat than we would wear in normal times, you can find solutions that are mutually beneficial, for everybody. Because a race to zero, nobody wins.
Very well said. And summing it up, I think pretty well, is communication with all the parties involved, and trying to work with people who actually want to help you move forward. So I think that's a very unique perspective from both sides, actually, both sides of the table. So Nick, we hit on some employment issues at a very high level earlier. So do you mind maybe diving into a bit of what issues you're already seeing and what issues you foresee coming up?
Sure. We just did a webinar yesterday on our own internal one on all of the various issues. The way that we've been seeing the employment issues is in three different buckets. You have your continuing to operate teleworking type of institutions. You have your essential businesses, which are operating on, some form of limited capacity, which I think, we've talked about a lot here. Obviously, the telework doesn't exactly work with a bar and a restaurant. There's some administrative functions with the management group that obviously can be handled from home, which I'm sure Jeff's dealing with. but that's not the bread and butter of what we're talking about today. And then the last part is the closing, the businesses that are closed, how to deal with that, how to deal with layoffs, how to deal with furloughs. I don't want to get overly granular. That's not exactly my wheelhouse with, the WARN Act and the various things you have to do if you're going to. Plus, I don't want to put everybody to sleep with some of this, the legal stuff. But there's the main issues that we're seeing, which I think are the most relevant here. Sorry for the long-winded answer. Are really going to be the questions that we're getting from clients, which are, what if somebody gets sick? I'm an essential business. I'm open to some level. What do I do if somebody gets sick? Who do I tell? How do I handle those issues? And it's complicated because you need to make sure that you are handling your business and making it as safe as possible for people who are coming in and continue to work, or you could be subject to liability. So if you are open and you have employees who aren't wearing masks, that's a major issue there, where if somebody else gets sick, hey, this so-and-so didn't wear a mask, he told me he was going to the beach, like Jeff was talking about. That's something that as management, you've got to really nip in the bud quite quickly, where if that person's not taking the social distancing requirements seriously and then showing up to work, that's a problem, potential liability, because if somebody gets sick or, God forbid, very sick and passes away, you're going to have some potential liability there for not mitigating the risk to the employees. A lot of entities have put up the sneeze guards, have taken steps to protect the employees as much as possible. And obviously those are the primary things. There's a lot of guidance from OSHA already that's out there. But again, I'm not gonna bore everybody with that. I'm happy to refer people to some links and things like that, to the extent they want. But the main legal things that we're seeing is these purposes are in that I'm operating. How do I keep my employees safe? If somebody gets sick, what do I do next? And those are the primary issues that we're seeing there from the operating entities. The other aspect of the closed businesses, laying people off. What are my requirements here? There's the mini WARN Acts, depending on which state you're in. There's some nuances and varieties based on the states that people are located in. But you have unemployment issues, health insurance issues, how to recall people if you come off of furlough. There's numerous issues that are being broached. Our employment group is by far the most active group that we have. Actually, T&E too, I guess, not to be too morbid, but people seem to realize their mortality in times of pandemic. So we're having will signings on the hoods of cars with everybody brings their own pen.
So I think a common question that we've seen, can you explain what furlough is for those out there who may not be exactly familiar with, from a technical term, what that actually means? Sure, and I'm happy to. Furloughing is when you temporarily I guess it's not a layoff, but people are not coming to work, but with the goal of them coming back to work, versus a layoff, which is like, hey, look, your position is going to be terminated due to this situation. So the furlough is you're not paying those employees, and they're basically on leave from the company with the goal of recalling them back to the company once things are operating. I'm sure that I know a handful of my clients have put people on furlough. Like I was mentioning before, they don't want to terminate the relationship with people, with their employees. They're good employees. In the restaurant business, the people who's, let's say, their parents wouldn't let them come in, those are technically, they're furloughed, because the idea would be they'd be coming back once mom and dad let them, or when this blows over. So now, are there any specific rights or issues that an employer should be aware of when furloughing someone versus laying them off? And I know that can be a very touchy subject. I know there's a lot of variables, but just I mean, key points maybe.
you have a number of different things to worry about. To think. I mean, you have reductions in employee hours and pay. Whether you're going to have across the board reductions, whether it's going to be just limiting people's hours. That's one. Temporary layoffs and furloughs. The employees are on leave. Whether you're extending health insurance and COBRA, you've got to treat everybody who's in that same bucket similarly. You can't be giving benefits to one and not another. With respect to permanent closings, you do have some WARN Act implications that you're going to have to deal with, and that's for covered employers where you're over 100 employees. You have your 60-day calendar notice. There's exceptions there where for unforeseen business circumstances, I think you'll see some litigation in that aspect, because if I'm laying off people due to a pandemic, I'm going to take the position that it's an unforeseen business circumstance. I guarantee you their attorney's going to say it was foreseen. You should have notified me. You didn't give me opportunity. So I think you'll see some litigation out of that. But the practical advice is just give people as much notice as you possibly can. And I think Jeff mentioned earlier, like communicating with everybody, trying to talk with everybody. I couldn't agree more. That's the primary way to isolate yourself from a potential claim or liability down the road. Then
to summarize, don't do anything without speaking to your advisors.
Yeah, speak with people. Make sure you're getting counsel, but also make sure like you're letting people know, hey, this is not looking good. I don't know how much longer we can do this. Giving people, you may want to start doing A, B, and C, and help them with unemployment, help them with however you can to avoid potential. You want to keep people at least thinking that you did well by them and did right by them. And that's more practical advice than strictly legal advice. But that's the happier or the more that people feel like you're upfront with them, I've found that the more success you have with them down the road.
Yeah, and I think definitely document it. We post on our bulletin boards and our internal scheduling. We shoot out emails. So there's a weekly update, a weekly, light at the end of the tunnel, no light at the end of the tunnel, just here's the links to this support. There's a lot of grants out there for bartenders. There's a lot of professional organizations that are, unions and things like that are giving, here's this, here's that, apply. We suggest you apply now. That kind of stuff that you could, as Nicholas said, you can go back and you can show, not just a telephone conversation.
Right.
Oh, well, I told him, exactly, yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. My head of my employment group would have yelled at me for not saying document.
Yeah.
It's a group effort here.
Yeah.
So before we move on to the next subject, I just want to remind everyone out there that the Q&A is open. So we'll have a couple minutes at the end here just to take any questions. I've seen some already come in. So while people are able to do that, Nancy, coming back to you, what do you think the substantial tax effects are going to be of this whole mess?
The tax effect.
I know we only have about 3 hours to talk about this. At the
What can I tell you? Look, right now we're at all these loans coming to us, and they're trying to figure out the perfection formula to make it forgiveness. And it's very hard when we can't, like in the restaurant industry, as we know, we can't keep the employees because there's no money coming in and there's no sales except on the takeout. And is it sufficiently on the takeout? So if the money's not coming in, do you have the right employees when you get these loans? So as we see a twofold tax effect, the first is, of course, filing the tax returns. Money not coming in, or the government's not going to get this, your tax is not going to be as great. They're issuing stimulus programs. It's going to be very hard in the sense. I mean, how do I explain it? If you can't get the money coming into your employees, they can't go out and spend and make this economy go around and have the money coming in. New York City is finding it harder because landlords still have to pay their bills. They still have to pay their real estate taxes, their water. And the restaurants still have the commercial rent tax that there has to be programs that have to try to help these city tenants to help them out as far as making their break-even number good. Are these programs going to come in time? Are the money going to come in? I think we're all talking about all those tax effects. Are we going to get these loans from the SBA? How much money is out there? I mean, it's the government. The government has to give us more guidance on what's going to happen. We could help prepare the numbers and tell you where you're going to be, but if you're not making money, you know, the bottom number is zero right now at this point. What are you going to get out of it? And it trickles down to every employee. How are they going to make money? How are they going to pay? So it's a trickle down effect as far as taxes. I mean, unless there's a specific question, you know, you don't make money, there's no taxes there. I mean, and there's no money to spend. It's very hard in that concept. I mean, people are still being paid. Some employers are trying to work from home. The essential workers are working from home, or our healthcare workers, but they can't spend their money because there's nothing to spend it on right now. Everything is shut down. So I gotta say, it's going to be a long process right now.
And are there any specific sections of the CARES Act? And we've talked about the PPP, we've talked about some of the loan programs via the SBA, but from the CARES Act itself, is there any section that you think really stands out for retail or restaurants?
Yes, there is. There's one rule that is saying that, and I think people are very confused on this. This says, how do you do the 10 million cap affiliation will work for hotels and restaurants? And the CARES Act says any single business's entity that is assigned an NICS number code beginning with 72, which includes restaurants and hotels, and employs not more than 500 employees per physical location, is eligible to receive that PPP loan. So if you were worried that you had affiliations, I think that being a code 72 and being a restaurant and a hotel is giving you the opportunity for each location to apply for this PPP loan and giving you a little more funds coming in. So that's very important for restaurant industries and hotels to start applying under those guidelines and get this SBA loan, because it's going to help you guys. It's going to help the employees also to give them the guidance, and hopefully, depending on the rules and regulations that keep changing, the grant making is some of it forgivable. I'm not saying 100% is going to be forgivable, because right now we're not employed too many employees, so we have to be able to hire again. And how are we going to hire? Like unemployment issues and all these, that the guidance are not 100% completely set in stone yet. Everything changes every day, so they think of something else and then they go back and amend it. So where you think you were, when you applied 2 weeks ago for this PPP, it was under these rules, they just changed again. So I still suggest keep applying, especially the restaurants and hotels. Keep applying, because each entity is different. You're on, there's no more the 10 million gap on these restaurants on an entity level. Same with the hotels. So I would keep applying for the PPP loan. Keep calling your banks and say, where am I at this situation? Because it's the bank with the underwritings who are going to get you this money faster. We'll get you the numbers, but they're going to get you the money as far as that.
I can't think of a better way to sum it up than that. So just one last question, and this is open to the entire group here. What are your collective thoughts on retail and restaurants that are in malls versus standalone locations? Do you see any material difference there? And I guess the bigger question here is what is the future for malls, shopping plazas, and the like?
Wow, that, as we all know, the malls, I think, are going to be very difficult. I mean, their concept of food is all open, just like a supermarket, or in New York City, you see everybody going into these delis where the open concept of foods day, you serve yourself. I think that's going to be a big change on that, because no one's going to want to take their own food that somebody else has touched with a spoon that may be tainted. And even if you have gloves on, it's still, they're going to have a lot of things. So I think that whole industry is going to change now, at least for a long time. So the mall, it's going to be hard because if people are not going out and they can't be open and the malls are not open at this point, they're going to find the harder industry to open up. Not as bad because everything is confined behind counters and you get the food, but the spacing and how is it going to work? Same with a regular restaurant. How many tables are you going to have in your location? How far apart they going to be? Are my waiters going to wear masks and gloves? And how many times are you going to change my gloves? And when you pick up the plates, are you coming down to my table and picking up another plate? Did you change your gloves? So it's going to be all policies and procedures and how much you could handle that. And the same way with the malls. It's how far away are my tables going to be? How far away do I have to stand behind the person now? So they're going to have a very hard time. And I don't think we have a set answer yet on that.
So what you're saying is the stickers we have on the floor right now in Whole Food to stand here are not going away anytime soon.
People, I don't think it's going away, but I think people inch up closer when the line gets bigger.
Right, right.
As far as that. So it's going to be the same way in a mall.
Hey, Zach, I apologize. I got to run, but yeah, malls are going to be worse.
What a line.
I apologize for not being able to elaborate on that, but it was great to be on with everybody.
All right, thanks. Man.
Take care.
Thanks, Sam. Well,
So
I have to tend to agree. I mean, it's just bigger. It's just more problems that are looped in. And I think that, that it's going to be interesting to see. Everybody's going to have to adapt. Everybody's going to have to change. The reality is that people, even when things return to normal, there's going to be changes and there's going to be less people in the restaurants, but there's the company restaurants are going to have to adapt and really get in with the delivery model. There's opportunities here. People are always going to want to eat and drink and do things. It's just, like I just bought a case of wine from my favorite local restaurant to help him out because he has too much space. There's no way that he can open for a delivery basis. It just doesn't work that way. It just wouldn't be economically feasible for him with the overhead and everything. But he's basically just selling inventory now. It's tough. You're going to definitely see limitations with a mall retailer. That's an added set of complications where you had a lot of walk-ups and things like that made it so enticing for years. Now the models that people are getting comfortable with is get things to my house and I don't want to see another person, and if they drop it off they better have a mask and gloves and all of those things. It's like, all right, now I'm going to light the bags on fire. It's like,
oh boy. But this does seem to continue a trend that started even before this, where there is less and less human interaction when it comes to retail. It does seem like more and more aspects of retail, not just food delivery, but it is moving to the Amazon Primes of the world, where every major retailer has some level of delivery service if they want to survive.
Yep, absolutely.
And not even talking about e-commerce. So I think in summation of this, when it comes to malls, shopping plazas, it will be curious to see how they adapt and how they change the new guidance that comes out to health and safety standards. And if, God forbid someone gets sick after this is over, going to a mall, I mean, Nick, to you specifically, what possible litigation do you think can come out of that? Like, how responsible would an ownership group be if even if following the standards that are out, someone gets sick?
I mean, that depends. I mean, if you're mitigating and you're following all of the guidance from local level, is local, state, federal level, that seems to be a good way to isolate yourself. I mean, generally, if you're in compliance with everything, that's pretty good defense. We took all reasonable precautions. It goes down to, it's going to be a case specific, fact specific. Hey, so-and-so had a fever. I reported it. Then they let's say it was an employee, let that employee wander around. Those are going to be circumstances that obviously are going to increase your chance of liability. But if you're following guidance and if you're taking the appropriate steps, any sign of sickness, people aren't coming in. The biggest thing that we had as this was developing was counseling people who wanted to stay open and, were essentially non-essential businesses where they did have the ability. This is a little bit away from the topic we're talking about, more of your traditional office people. Like,
Right.
let's say you guys, accountants, well, why do you need the office open? Like, if somebody gets sick and you have let's say a non-exempt employee coming in and you're making them come into the office and then they were to get sick while all of the accountants are at home, what's the potential for liability there? Something that I said it's not worth it to clients. I said, if you have the ability to remote compute, give that ability to everybody to telework and continue your operations sooner rather than later, because this isn't going away, with a snap of a finger. No matter how much some people think that it's going to, this is going to take a while until there's some level of vaccine or some level of treatment that is I'll just say proven.
And I can't think of a better way to end this.
Nice on the happy note.
Exactly. Just how we drew it up. But
I'll
I
say
do
my,
think that is a good
one last comment. The only other comment I'm going to say is that there is still a lot of compliance that has to be done. So don't think that because we're closed down restaurants, hospitality, there's still payroll forms, sales tax forms, compliance still have to be done, because we do not know, you're not going to be abated of interest, penalties and everything, because just because they abated one doesn't mean we're going to be going forward. The government still has to exist and they still want their compliance. So just don't forget, because you're closed down, that these forms still do not have to be done. They have to all be done. Even the filing of return, just to let you know.
And there's the exclamation point.
Exactly. Now you can end now.
All right. I want to thank everyone for attending. I want to thank the panelists, of course. We will be sending this out along with everyone's contact information, should anyone out there have any questions. And again, thank you so much for attending. Panelists, thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Nice to meet you, Nancy and Jeff. It was great speaking with you guys.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll meet under better circumstances.
Yeah.
Jeff, we'll go down to Florida and hang out over
I was
there.
going to
There
say,
you
once
go.
this is done, we're going down to one of Jeff's bars, nightclubs for the grand opening. All right.
That's it.
Take it easy, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you.